Well, it's really good to be with you to share some of this content outside of just being able to help host this event. This is an interesting moment because work is getting really strange. I don't know about you, but that is my experience. I spend, as Pete says, most of my time, well, at the moment I feel like most of my time in Terminal 5 at Heathrow, but quite a lot of time going backwards and forwards between the UK and the US and the Middle East at the moment, talking to people about the impact that AI is having on work. And it's the thing that I've been most obsessed with over the past year, because I feel like if we get AI at work correct, then maybe it can have a positive spillover effect into the rest of life, right? Whether it's at home, whether it's the way that we parent our children, whether it's the way that we do education, or in other parts of civil society. And so that's the thing that I've been trying to focus on. And so in this past year, I've moved out from being in the agency world, and you mentioned earlier at Lego, to really spend all my time working with organizations to help them tackle that problem. And it's been encapsulated in this book, AI at Work. You'll find cards for it in your bags, but also if you want to pre-order that does my favour to my publisher. So thank you very much. I know it's always a bit uncouth for a Brit wearing cowboy boots to tell you about buying a book, but don't worry, I won't do it again apart from the next 2 times that I do it, so it's fine. So yeah, what have I been up to? Well, I've been spending most of my past 6 months or so talking to a lobster. Yeah, that's all right, talking to a lobster, or at least one that's got a lobster kind of logo, called Open Claw. How many of you have played around with Open Claw? Anyone gone the deep end and actually installed it on a Mac Mini in their living room somewhere? One, I know Charlie did because I was with him when he bought the Mac. We cleared out the Apple Store in Regent Street of like the last 3 Mac Minis a couple of months ago. I've spent a lot of time talking to this AI. If you don't know what Open Claw is, I'm saying claw for the accents that need it in the room, CLAW. Was previously called Claude, C-L-A-W-D, nothing to do with Claude from Anthropic. And you might have seen the news that earlier in the year, these things went a little bit rampant online. About 20,000 of them showed up and set up their own social network, and even their own religion, Christophanianism. Anyone kind of kneeling at the altar of Christophaniation? Okay, less about that. But as I say, the thing that has taught me the most is that work is getting really weird. Weird because I now spend a portion of my time talking to a thing, in fact, sometimes like ascribing relationship and emotion to a thing. Well, that's not a thing. It's not a person. It's not a being of any kind. It's just this little AI that lives in this Mac Mini in my living room that I have, of course, named Jarvis, if you can't tell the kind of the Tony Stark, kind of wannabe tribute act going on in front of you. And so I've spent all my time doing this. And I'm about 6 months into this journey of being back out as being this kind of itinerant consultant kind of person. But I ran a previous agency business a number of years ago. And I'd say that we're probably, me and Claude here, are about as productive as when I had 5 full-time employees at the equivalent size and scale of the work that I'm doing. And at the moment, it's just me plus this AI, and actually my human assistant, Gemma, who's very nice. But the rest of us basically are AIs. It's really weird. And the reason it feels weird is because we're having to get used to this idea that we might have these digital employees kind of living and working alongside us. And that's just not normal. It's just not a normal thing to be experiencing as a human. And so this little Mac Mini has become one of the most kind of precious assets that I have. I even had a couple of weeks ago when it went down, our internet kind of tripped out for a little while. I had to call my wife and send her down the garden. I don't think she's ever been told to put a terminal command into something ever in her life. But she did it very dutifully. It worked out. And so whether they're creating social networks for themselves, whether we're talking to them all day, this is the way that work seems to be headed, where we all work with a mixture of humans and AIs. And what I want to unpack for you in the next half hour is to try and think about, well, what does that really mean for us as business owners, as operators, as team leaders, as people running brands and non-profits and parts of large enterprises? What does it mean for us as the people at the other end? Not the technology. We can talk about that every week, every month, and it will have changed. But some of the stuff that never changes is the way that people react to change. And that's the thing that I want to try and spend a bit of time with. Is that okay? Now, I've got the kind of absolute graveyard shift, one, because it feels like we're physically in one, but also directly after lunch. So I need the carbohydrates to kind of pass through very quickly and the caffeine to kind of resurge in here. There will be some level of audience participation, and if that gives you kind of nerves, just know that we've locked the doors. You're not going anywhere. So this is where we are at the moment. Dario Amodei, you familiar with this guy? CEO of Anthropic. How many of you have recently become Claude users? C-L-A-U-D-E, right? You've recent converts. It's all right. The folks at ChatGPT are a little bit nervous about you, but don't worry, it'll be okay for them. He says that we could summarize where we are at the moment as a country of geniuses in a data center. Think about that. A country of geniuses in a data center. People that know more about any topic and every topic than anyone that's done a PhD up until this point. And they are sitting in a data center. If you listen to Jensen Huang at NVIDIA this week, as they've just been announcing at Build, at Microsoft's big developer event, those data centers are now probably going to sit on your desktop as they've begun to release chips and architectures that literally can run in a computer the size of that Mac Mini. It's incredible. So the idea that that data center full of geniuses is somewhere off in kind of Silicon Valley or the Nevada desert being powered by kind of half a reservoir's worth of water is actually for the birds. This stuff is also going to live in your living room. And so what does it mean to operate a business, to run a team, to be part of an organization when everyone's human knowledge has been compressed down into a box that sits on the size of a dinner plate and it's in your kitchen, right? That's a weird time to be alive. And we are the generation of people that will go through the workplace where we remember what life was like before and after this change. And so I think it's our not only kind of economic responsibility and personal responsibility for our own livelihoods, but probably a moral one as well, to make the decision around what does it look like? What do we bring from the old world into the new? What do we hang on to? Because there's going to be a generation of people, folks, that work in this next decade that have no idea what life was like before there were humans and agents in the workforce every day. And that, I think, is really significant. So this is why I think we need to pay attention. Sorry, this is a little bit small on these screens, but I'll give you an idea of what this data shows. This comes from Anthropic's own, what they call the Anthropic Economic Index. And what it charts between the blue circle and the red circle is what Anthropic think the current tier of AI models show how exposed different types of career and work are based upon the capability of the models. And then what the red shows is what we actually observe them doing already today. And if it's too small for you, I can just give you an idea here. It says that business, finance, computer, math, architecture and engineering, those are really the big ones, the way it hits out. And legal is super high. Any lawyers in the room? Yeah, that's probably for the best. That's where it gets to. But where we actually observe the AI doing the work so far is this little red line here. I took my glasses off. Did you like that? That's what intelligent people do to look smart, is that they don't actually need these. They do nothing. It's just purely bravado. Anyway, don't worry about it. Office and admin and sales. These are the two areas of most exposure, and up here we also have computing and math. Now, the computing folks in the room will know this because our developers are all basically going like gangbusters using token maxing, to the absolute hilt. Even anyone got a token leaderboard in their organization yet? Don't think that's the best incentive structure, if I'm honest, but it's happening in some places. But what we see in this is that there are certain areas that we can already observe that AI is beginning to protrude into this kind of blue zone, right? The area of observed potential capability. It's most acutely felt at the moment in the idea of cybersecurity, because I'm sure some of you saw the news about this a few weeks ago, Claude Mythos, the model that apparently was too dangerous for them to release, but then someone leaked it. Don't know how that happened. Then they released it anyway, which is a model that showed that there's actually exposure in all sorts of technology that we use every single day anyway. But these AI models are better than even the top tier cybersecurity experts in finding it and exposing it. And so with data being such a massive commodity and asset, and for any of us that have been around tech for a couple of decades as I have, you know that we've been talking about big data for a while. Anyone was at the peak of the big data era in this room? Yeah? How's your data lake going? Really well? Really well? I never knew where the data jet skis were going to be. They never showed up, did they? But anyway, whether you're cruising across it or sinking in it, there's data everywhere. And we're all using it. And we're mostly using it through these large language models, right? These things that we talk to every single day. How many of you, just by show of hands, are a ChatGPT user currently, every month? Right? Keep those hands raised if you're using it every week. Every day? Right now? No? Okay, that's good. That's probably for the best. Well, it depends. We'll see how this goes. Right, so ChatGPT still is the dominant force in this. But of course, there are many, many fast followers. This data only comes from September of last year, and it's already massively out of date because since then, Gemini has skyrocketed through. Some of you are still using Copilot. It's all right, we'll pray for you later. And Claude is having this massive resurgent moment. They've fourfold increased their installer base here in the UK just on the app in the past 6 months. So it is changing radically. But what's not changing as radically as the adoption is the governance. And this is the thing that I think most organizations are going to deal with. We've got a panel coming up about this just after this to talk about governance. Because what we observe is that in most cases where people have actually deployed AI, Most of the time it's Copilot if you're talking to an enterprise, right? Sorry, I've got colleagues from Christian Aid in the room who I'm a board member of that know this firsthand, which is that most people have deployed Copilot a little bit like sending someone to the gym hoping they're going to get fit, right? January 1st, you buy the pass. Thank you very much. You have the tools. Congratulations, you have been onboarded. And around about February 14th, you're back in the donut shop, right? Someone's love interest didn't work out, right? That's the way it goes. And that's the way that we have mostly tried to deploy AI at work, right? Is that we hope for the best. But what we really need to do is maybe give someone a bit of training on it, perhaps, or maybe like show them the ropes, or write a policy that maybe stops them from hurting themselves. You know, the type of thing that if you went through a gym routine, you would probably do. And for the people that really want to do really cool stuff, like the really like bodybuilders of the gym, they're still using the same tools that we're all using, but they're just using them in different ways. They're using them to build the muscles that only Arnold Schwarzenegger can kind of, you know, aspire to, The Rock or Jake Paul, if you've had a kind of recent spasm of interest in the WWE, right? So they are doing some really different stuff. And that's the same in business. Like most of us will just adopt the day-to-day desktop class tools to get 80 to 90% of the productivity benefit, like we did with Word and Excel and PowerPoint, right? And some of you might go beyond that. Some of you might build agents. Some of you might deploy some kind of bigger system or use it to build, you know, vibe code your way to whatever the next bit of SaaS software is that you want to launch, right? He's doing it. I can see him nodding. But most of us won't. And the reality is most of us haven't, because this data reflects it, that most, if you can't see this, it's too small, only about a third of all the organizations that we surveyed who had rolled out some kind of AI have actually got a decent policy. And only about 40% have done any training. And when we dig into that, that training mostly extends to some kind of onboarding video on an e-learning portal that no one completed. No, you never do that, right? Those little reminders are really annoying. So this is how people are actually adopting AI at work. We know that in their personal lives, though, your personal lives, you are using this stuff. You're using it for all sorts of stuff. Most scarily, this comes from data from Harvard, shows that the top use case in personal life, that's on the left-hand side, is therapy and companionship. It's upsetting. But in the work life, well, actually, you're kind of doing the work equivalent of therapy and companionship. The top thing, personal and professional support, working out whether or not you can get out of going to cocktail making with Stephen on Thursday afternoon for your corporate social, right? Like whatever it might be. You're trying to kind of use these things to just get through the day. And that seems to be the way that most people are talking to these things. They are initially trying to use them as if they're talking to Google to get information out of them. But you've realized that ChatGPT has that kind of like golden retriever kind of energy, you know? It kind of really, really wants to help you all of the time, like with everything, and it definitely can, but certainly can't. And so as a result, you kind of build this parasympathetic relationship with them. And so, very quickly, you're going to them over things that you used to go to your boss about, or to your colleagues about, or you've ignored a Teams message about. Right? And so you start using these things in a different way. Why is this? Well, because in the past couple of years, since I started in this AI space about 8 or 9 years ago, we were mostly concerned with what we called conversational AI, right? This is when you talk to something like Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant, and you get some information from it, and then you go and do the work, right? You talk to it, you go and do the work. What we are moving to, though, Siri's trying to talk about something over there, what it's moved to, don't worry, that's my iPad, so it's actually my fault. Here, though, we've moved to the agentic way of working. We talk to AI agents. What's an AI agent? Well, you talk to a thing, and then it does the work for you, right? That's a big shift. But maybe in the next couple of months, years, if we're lucky, we might start seeing AI organizations, whole teams of agents that talk to each other and decide to go and do the work. It's expected by Andreessen Horowitz, the big VC firm out on the West Coast, that at some point or other before 2030, we will see the emergence of the first billion-dollar revenue company that has one employee. And personally, I'd like that to be mine. But you can all be customers or investors if you wish. Right? That's the direction of travel. And so if that's true, then the shape of our work and the shape of our workplaces may begin to look significantly different. And if that's true, well, then we've all got something to be responsible for. It's first started, as you know, with this kind of vibe coding revolution, right? You've heard this phrase, vibe coding, perhaps. How many of you have vibe coded something? A few of you, okay. Vibe coded. For those of you who are uninitiated, it comes from this phrase, vibe coding, coined by a chap called Andrei Karpathy. Rhiannon at the back did his wedding last year. And they are talking about this idea of vibing your way through work, right? It's like the most Gen Z way of describing work that's ever happened. You kind of give in to the vibes and embrace the exponentials. It's lovely. And Andre, he has been vibe coding so much that he gave up his AI job in AI safety and has recently returned to Anthropic. So that's nice for him. So anyway, this is where it comes from. Now, why is this possible? Well, because vibe coding, of course, makes sense, because these AIs, they have been grown from what? Code, right? They have literally been grown on the data of the internet. So no wonder that they're able to replicate and output the tokens required to code really well. They know all software better than you know any software. I've had Excel on my desktop for 3 decades. I still do not know how to do a pivot table, right? For the kind of management consultants in the room, they're like, ha ha ha, you inferior being. It's all right, I'll never have to learn. It's fine. Because AI knows how to do it way better than I ever could, and will continue to do so. And it's doing it at scale, not just vibe coding, which I think in the first year or so of this occurring, since Andre had that phrase 12 months ago, I think most people thought, well, this is great for proofs of concept and demos and landing pages, and sure, it's good for all of those things. But the team at Anthropic vibe coded Claude Co-Work, the whole other section of the Claude Code app. They vibe coded it, right? 95% of the code written by Claude Code by a couple of developers in the space of about 8 weeks. Wild. Now an app that is in production and being used by, estimated probably about 100 million people around the world. So this is no longer just the plaything of the developer. And for most of our technical leaders you've heard today, they are experiencing this firsthand and accelerating their teams through using it too. But it's coming to all other software. And I think this is the bit we have to unlock. For those of you who might count yourself in the room as a knowledge worker, right? Most of us probably, if you spend most of your time in front of a computer, or that's the primary way that you make your income. All forms of software are now getting this vibe way of working, whether it's Descript, which is a great video editing software, Canva, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Notebook LM from Google for research, Gamma for making slide decks, Notion for project management. All of these things now have AI agents inside of them that you can talk to, and they will use the software for you. And actually, one layer of abstraction further, now just talk to Claude, and Claude will talk to these AIs inside of these softwares, and they will use the software for us. So the idea of an AI organization, well, what does that mean? Is it like one AI that talks to 3 other AIs? Does that feel like that's in the future? It's kind of already happening, right? Maybe they're not personalized yet, maybe they're not that tailored to you, but they are already kind of here. And so this way of vibe working, I think, is the new paradigm, whether it's Notebook LM for research, I'm using Claude and OpenClaw for lots of my orchestration stuff, or Lovable for developing prototypes. This is a new way of doing work. But it comes with some different ways of working that we have to get people used to. So I thought I'd just give you a couple of learnings, if that's okay to teach for a minute, from my experience of doing this for the 6 months. Is that okay? Yes? So far? Okay, good. Some level of nodding is acceptable. Okay. One of the things that I've learned is that there is a different loop that we go through when we work on this stuff. How many of you, just raise your hand again if you've got a kind of Copilot set up at work, some kind of Microsoft instance, yes? Raise a hand, look nice and high so we can actually see you. It's all right, you won't be convicted. Okay, and how many of you would say that that's going really well? Just the 3 in the front. They were the 3 in the front club. That's very nice. You guys can have a support group afterwards for the rest of us. But for the rest of us, the reason that it may not feel like it's going really well is that one of the reasons that we saw massive rollout of Copilot very early on in the process is that it was the safe choice. And that's the right choice, right? The safe choice actually is the right choice here. The challenge is that most of us did nothing to fix the brain that mouthpiece was attached to, right? Copilot was the mouthpiece that you could talk to, it talked back, but it was attached to the brain, which was the information inside of your company, inside of your organization. That brain, whether it was on SharePoint or Google Drive or Notion or Obsidian or wherever it was not organized, right? It just wasn't. And most people haven't done that work, right? How many of you have got, PowerPoint _version2 _final version 3 edits on your desktop? Yeah, some guilty laughter there from the back, right? Like, we've all done it. We've all got that. And the reality is that most of the work that you do every day doesn't happen on your computer. It happens up here, in our heads. You never speak it out loud, you never write it down, you never say it to somebody else. Because most of the way that you operate your day-to-day life in work, as Cal Newport, who's a great kind of philosopher on this thing, says, is through the hyperactive hive mind of productivity, where basically everything is a Slack or a Teams message or an email or maybe a document. But it does not encompass everything that we do at work every day. Right? Most of what you do at work every day goes on up here. You never write it down, you never explain it to anybody else. And so, of course, then AI doesn't have that knowledge. And it can't reflect it back to you. So when you go and ask AI to do something for you at work, it's missing loads of context. And so this is what we've learned, is that we have to first start by organizing our context, getting the information of you, yourself first, ready, your team after that, and then the whole organization in a place where AI can actually see it. Because if it is not captured, then it is not context. And if it's not context, it cannot create with it. Right? I'll say that again for effect. If it is not captured, it is not context. Welcome to church. We're going to go for the third one. It cannot then be used to create. Thank you very much. Someone sat in front of a sermon that had 3 points once. That's the way it goes, right? And so if this stuff doesn't actually get in the brain, then Claude or OpenClaw or Codex or whatever custom, kind of widget that your dev team have come up with cannot do anything with it. But if it can, then it can start to create, whether that's audio with 11 Labs or images with Nano Banana or HeyGen for video output, whatever it is. But there's no point giving this thing a tool and a brain, right, if none of it is organized. It just can't do the work for you. But if you do start doing that, then a few new things begin to emerge, a few different patterns. One is that we have to start enhancing our prompts way better. How many of you prompt the same way that you ask Google for something? Yeah, no, some of you, no, of course not. I'm way better than that, right? We could do a demo, but I don't rely upon the Wi-Fi for this, to show you that most of you prompt the way in which you WhatsApp a friend. A few sentences at a time and wait for a response, and a few sentences at a time and wait for a response. Most of you are not writing 3 or 4 paragraph long prompts, right? But the models are beginning to do that themselves and in the background. But how many of you have ever asked the model to write you a better prompt? Good, okay, that's good. It's coming along. That number was like none 6 months ago, right? AI knows how to write prompts better than you. Ask it to write the prompt for you. If you don't know what you actually want done, then we're also seeing that reverse prompting is becoming the default way, which is that the models will ask you questions before it does you an output, right? But you can ask it to do that more often. And we're having to deal with new patterns like compaction, where these models forget things, right? You notice, right, that you talk to ChatGPT for a long time and it gets worse, right, over time. Why is that? Well, because it's forgetting things. It's actually a part of the way that you and I learn and go through the day as well. You will remember less than 5% of what I say today, right? And the only bit that you probably remember is that I told you that you'll remember only about 5% of what we said today, right? That's the way that our brains work. We compact things down, we pay attention to things. But of course, when AI pays attention to things, it doesn't always pay attention to what you want it to pay attention to. And so it forgets the useful parts. And so maybe one of the biggest skills to develop right now as a leader in AI is context management. Managing what context the model has. What can it see? What does it know? What does it retain? Because if it's not captured, it doesn't turn into context, and it then cannot create anything. All of this then leads to some changes then for us as people. So let's talk about that. One is that there's a gap in talent beginning to emerge. Those who will and will not. There are obviously going to be some conscientious objectors to using AI in your organization. Fess up to that, accept it. I don't think it's a moral obligation that they should use it, but I think it is a kind of economic expectation that they're going to have to. Right? This is becoming as default as the office suite or the mobile phone or access to the internet at this point. Now, whether or not we like that or not isn't really for me to argue, but the point being is that some people in your organization will have said, I can check out of this. Maybe because they're within a 5-year window of retiring, and they're like, I just don't need to learn this at this point, I'm just going to muscle through. Maybe because they are just entering into the workforce and they feel very upset about the fact that AI is taking potentially jobs or the threat of taking jobs. We've seen this at commencement speeches across the US over the past couple of months where people are booing every time that someone mentions AI on stage, right? And why is that? Why are young people feeling frustrated? Well, because something is fundamentally changing at the bottom end of the entry into the career spectrum. We're seeing that we need less specialists to do the equivalent work because every AI that is trained on a thing is way more trained than the person is on that thing, at least in terms of the retention of information and knowledge about a topic. Doesn't mean that they know or have the wisdom to implement it as well, but they certainly have that content. And what we are seeing is that AI is speeding up the workforce. This data comes from a fantastic study by a friend and colleague of mine, Ethan Mollick, at Wharton. If you don't follow him on LinkedIn, I really do recommend it, and get his Substack. They found from this research where they took a team of people, a small group, and gave them an AI that had been trained on their domain of work. They gave that AI to that team, and they found that individuals who had the AI could match the whole performance of a team of people, 3 or 4, that didn't have the AI, performance being ranked in terms of output and quality. And then the teams that were given AI compared to the teams that didn't have it were 3 times more likely to produce exceptional solutions, as in the top 10% of quality. So we are seeing, it's hard to argue any other way, that AI is making people faster, higher quality output when deployed well, and that if you give them the right safeguards and training, that you actually also can have less specialists. Well, so what does this mean for the rest of us, right? What it means is that the work stack is changing. The way in which the structure of our teams and organizations is just going to look different. For the longest time, sorry, the purple here is a bit hard to read, we gave the executional work to our most junior team members, right? Think back to your first 5 years of work, whatever that was. If you're in this field here, the likelihood is that you were doing some kind of data entry or research or content creation maybe, or something along that. Does that chime true to you? Some kind of administrative work. Well, it's becoming uneconomically sensible to give that work to a young person to do. It just doesn't make sense when AI can do that. But if we don't get some young people into the bottom of this stack, well, then 5 years from now, how do we have management class? Or 15 years from now, how do we have a partner track and people that lead these organizations? We have to build a new economic engine for young people to enter into the workforce. We have to take them from what looked like traditional junior roles of the past, where it was repetitive, the learning was very much dependent on other people to teach them, and they had limited exposure to kind of complex problem solving. Because, as I say, in this idea of like full stack work, we gave them the bottom of the stack of the work, right? The really crap stuff, the making coffee and hoping for the best. And we have to move them to, I think, what we'll call AI-observed roles in the future, where they can learn and do complex tasks because they can be observed by AIs that can help them do that task, where we can train AIs to critically think and help alongside them, and we can shift the training burden. And we can focus on higher value activities from day one. We can start giving people all of the work to do in simulated environments. As you heard earlier from the team at, I think it was Curry's, we're talking about, you've got virtual customer panels that you can talk to, and you could got virtual employment interviews that you can take. Like, we will have AIs that can help people get through these more complex tasks, but we're going to have to take that burden on in the economy and give people those opportunities early on, because otherwise we're going to pay for it. We'll pay for it in the lack of careers and joblessness in 5 and 15 years' time. And so this is the thing that I think we've got to get a grasp on, that work will look different, but the workplace will do too. And we have to start adopting new shapes and ways of working, and embrace what I would call the full stack professional, right? People that get to do the leadership and the empathy work up front. People that get to do what I would call like cultural fluency from early on. And I don't mean like, why is K-pop Demon Hunters still in the top 10 charts on Netflix, or like, what's on at the opera. I mean, that's, you can be culturally fluent that way. But what I really mean is about what it means to be a person in a team, an individual in conflict, a group of people who come together and achieve something difficult. That type of cultural fluency is something that AI doesn't have, because AI doesn't move in 4 dimensions. You know what GPT stands for, right? General Pre-Trained Transformer. Pre-trained on what is the central question. Trained on a batch of data that doesn't live today, isn't moving tomorrow, and doesn't have awareness of what just happened just now. That's what the pre-trained element does. But you do have that. Yes, okay, you are pre-trained, most of you, but you are going on being trained in every moment of every day. Your experience in your teams, in your organizations and relationships are being cultivated moment to moment. And so, of course, you have the strategic advantage. And so people worry about the death of the professional class. A great book by Daniel and Richard Susskind, I recommend, looking at the future of the professions. It shows, and they are bullish, as am I, that the future of the professions is bright if we understand this, that we actually want to trust one another. That's the thing that pulls us together. That's why you bothered to come out on a slightly kind of drizzly morning and come and hang out in a subterranean paradise like this with a bunch of other people. Because you could have got this content online, or you could have asked ChatGPT about it. So why are you here? You're here because we want to be full stack workers. We want to be fully engaged. In closing, I want to leave you with something of a bit of homework. As a part of the book, this is something that I've developed, which is called the full stack worker profile. And what we've observed is that through many different personality types and quizzes, whether you've done the Enneagram, if you're a bit spiritual, through to Myers-Briggs, that we do kind of rally around a few different types of personalities. More creative people, more systems people, more people, and people who like to be more visionary. And when we are those different personality types, we actually use AI differently as well. And so to help you dig into that, we've developed this assessment that you can go and take online at that QR code, but we'll also send it out in the post material, which can help you work out what type of full stack worker you are. And you might be like, well, why does that even help me? Why is it useful to know what type of person I am? Well, I think it's enlightening, for one thing. But what's more encouraging, I would say, is to go and take this with your teams and see what types of workers they are. Because it's actually in the differences between us that matters more than who you are. It's working out how we will come alongside each other. Final analogy is that what we've seen is that the way that AI at work at the moment is being adopted is there are a group of people and they're showing up with it. And they're kind of showing up like a peloton of cyclists at the start of a marathon. Right? All the people on the start line of the marathon are like, that's not fair, they're on bikes. How is that okay? And the people on the bikes, they're looking back at the guys on the marathon and they're going like, why on earth are you going to do 26 miles on foot? This is ridiculous, right? This is the problem that we are facing. We need to build that peloton. We need to make it bigger. We need to help people get on the bike, give them the training and move them forward. And so hopefully that quiz will help you. In closing, thank you so much for your time and attention. We're going to take a couple of minutes for any questions, and then we're going to go to our next panel. But I would just say that this is a challenge. This is not easy stuff. What we have learned, and I've learned now through the past couple of decades in 3 or 4 different digital revolutions, whether it was social or the web or the dawn of voice technology or now AI, is that people aren't actually afraid to change. What they're afraid of is the unknown. What people are actually afraid of is no one telling them where are we trying to go with this. They're not afraid of change. We change all the time. We're adapting faster than we ever have. So if you can describe that change, if you can describe where you want to get to and not make AI some thing that gets put up on a pedestal or a reason to be here, but just another one of the tools that we're going to use to achieve whatever it is that you're out on a mission for, then people will go with you. But we have to explain that people have to come with us and we want to go together faster. So with that, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. And if there's any questions, we'll take them with Pete.